All right. Thank you for being here. O.E. Tearmann, the name for two collaborative writers. How has collaborating in writing affected your individual writing, like in style and attitude?
I think it encouraged me to be a lot more clear and precise. I couldn't simply get away with loosey-goosey poetry. So my name is Olivia. I'm one half of the author team that wears O.E. Tearmann as a trench coat. My background is originally in the sciences, and my first love was poetry and the oral storytelling tradition. So I grew up in a family where we told stories, but that encouraged a certain fantastical, many, many years ago style. And when I started working with my co-writer, I had to nail my style down and get a lot more precise and get a lot better at giving solid science fiction answers to questions.
Would you call then the science fiction you do like hard science fiction, or I'm not sure the degrees of it, but I guess soft science fiction would be the other version.
Science fantasy almost. I
Okay.
if you're going for I make the distinction between Kim Stanley Robinson and Star Trek. Star Trek is science fantasy. It
Mhm.
has lasers and it has blasters, but you don't understand how any of it works. Whereas Kim Stanley Robinson is walking you through the entire carbon cycle so that you understand how we could refreeze the Antarctic if we needed to one day.
Yeah.
And I say I don't know enough to be as far as Kim Stanley Robinson, but I aspire to that level.
Okay. I like that. I'm not sure. I imagine the crowd or audience for science fiction fantasy is probably larger than science fiction hardcore. Tell me about the periodic table science.
I think it really depends on what kind of story you're telling, less than what fan base you're going for. There are stories where if you don't explain it, it doesn't make a lick of sense, and you better have a good explanation for how that works. And then there are stories where it's a blaster. You don't need to explain a blaster. It's a blaster. Just like you don't need to explain the science of a shotgun. It's a shotgun.
Hmm.
So I think the story tends to dictate the style, rather than the audience dictating the style. So I walk a fine line when I'm writing the Aces High Jokers Wild series with my friend Nonier. Um, we are Firefly for the cyberpunk genre. So it's a lot of, okay, we're out of water today. How do we get water? Well, this is how you drill a well, or this is how you condense water right out of the air. Now, how do you do it with the parts from a junkyard? This is how. So there's just enough explanation and just enough science that, okay, go to the junkyard and steal this, 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 and this, so that our hydroelectrics officer can put together a water condenser. But never so much that you're reading an electrical textbook.
Hmm. So, how do y'all split up the writing then? Does somebody do world building and then other person does mainly story? Do you do it together? Do you talk about it before and then do chapter to chapter, or how do y'all split it up?
Yeah, this is a great question. We've written 8 books together so far, so we have a pretty slick system by this point. We wrote the what we call draft 0, the less than first draft of everything together in the span of 1 year. And it was basically get home from work, say, "How was your day?" "Crap." "How was your day?" "Okay." "I need to blow something up tonight. How do you feel about blowing something up tonight?" And at that point, we were focused on character and emotion, and we would throw in a MacGuffin to make a scene happen. Next stage is draft 1. That's my job. I look through all of that back and forth writing where we were just sitting together and essentially one person would posit lines from one character and the next one person would answer it back and forth to write an entire scene with some basic premises agreed to. My job is to take all of that, break it up into, okay, this giant chunk is book 1. This giant chunk is book 2. I don't know what that is. That's going to be a short story. This is something else. And this is trash. And then take whatever giant chunk we had for book 1 and turn it into something that is sensible, hangs together, is coherent, and works for someone else to read. Then I pass it back to my writing partner, who cleans up all of the places where I didn't hit the enter key at the right time, all of the errors in timing, all of the moments where my cat sat on the keyboard. Passes it back to me. I do a final pass. Then we pass it to our expert readers. We have somebody who does InfoSec work, who reads for our technical issues in InfoSec. We have someone who has been in the Army and works with munitions, who can tell us, don't do that with a gun. That's really not what you do with a gun. And a few other folks who read for us. Then we pass it to our beta readers, who are just clever mainstream readers who can tell us, yeah, I like this, or no, now I hate the character, I don't like that. We clean it up after those stages, and then we pass it to our editor and our publisher. And then it's a book.
What kind of programs do you use for writing back and forth, like Google Docs or Dabble, or how do you do that?
Yeah. Used to be, before Skype was awful, we used Skype for the first round, that draft 0 I was talking about. And then we take all of that and drop it into a Word document for saving later. However, one day we opened the document and it was so large that we had broken Word. It wouldn't open the document. So we switched over to using Google Docs. Google Docs has served us well. Google has background problems with its security that I'm not happy with. But for the purposes of a manuscript that I intend to be sending to other people that honestly wouldn't make anyone enough money to steal, I'm okay to use Google Docs.
I've done a couple of collaborations with another guy on some science fiction novellas, and we started with Google Docs, and it was just, I don't think we looked at it from the security standpoint. He maybe did. He's more computery than me. And it was just some of the features that Dabble offered at the time through their collaboration part that was still in beta. We were able to get onto the beta copy of that worked better. It was simpler, and you could get on there. I think on Google Docs, you could probably see when the other person was typing, and Dabble just seemed nicer, separated it nice. And we finished them on Dabble, but it's interesting to go back and forth with somebody writing, and then you see their changes. And the way we did it was a little different to where we talked about it before, and then we just started. It was basically an idea that was all his. So in the world of giving up control of the story, that's, for me, collaboration teaches you that a lot. Is you can come up with a chapter of something, and then somebody else looks at it and goes, well, I didn't really see it happening like that. I saw it happening like this. And you go, okay, well, I'll adjust. But I kind of gave up that to him because I saw it as his idea from the start. And then we did a lot of world building just from the science fiction standpoint of, different solar systems, different places that aren't familiar. So you have to build all those up. And there's a lot more in our conversations than ever made it to the page, because you have to know the stories of everything and the lore of it for it to make sense and track when you're writing it.
I totally hear that. I actually started a world building Bible as we were writing, so that I would be able to go back and double check what was that thing called the first time round. By the time you're writing book 7, you really don't want to have to go back to book 3 and dig out that one point that you wrote a thing. And also so that we could easily collaborate on, okay, we brought this up in book 2. We could use it as a plot point in book whatever. And that was very useful. And this is our own hometown that we're writing about. Well, not hometown for me, but even writing your own town in the future, if you don't keep a world building Bible over a long running project, good luck.
Yeah.
We actually kept a lot of world building partly because we were building a new, well, we were extrapolating what society could become, our hopes and our fears about what society could become tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And also because we were tracking a lot of scientific information about what Colorado is probably going to look like in 100 years. Because we wanted to build in that sense of what's it like to live in a Colorado that has climate changed pretty substantially. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? And so all of that went into the world building as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You get lost in the ideas of what's going to happen when you're looking at the future of things, especially things you know. I think it might be easier to just build it all from scratch. Like people are still people, and you have places, and they have the wheel and all that, so it's familiar in that case. But it's just the classic long time ago, galaxy far, far away type of thing.
It definitely is harder when you're extrapolating an existing city or an existing place, because someone can always call you out. Someone can always tell you it wouldn't go like that. But you have to be okay with that. And it means that you can make a lot of local jokes that your local readers will enjoy. For example, there is a place here in town called Commerce City. Well, I've gotten compliments as an author from people who aren't local, who are like, Commerce City, that was a cool cyberpunk name. And of course, as the writer, I'm just like, thanks. And locals are like, oh, you put that in there. Oh, and you had something happen there that completely would happen in Commerce City just with a laser. Yeah, I like it. For example, there is a local feature, pet food factory that everyone in this neighborhood hates. It tends to clog up traffic on one of our major highways that gets you out of one neighborhood and into the center of the city. It stinks to high heaven. And because you're stuck in front of it for the entire traffic jam, you just come to loathe it. So we burned it down in one book for a very good reason. But we had several locals write us and say, thank you for burning down the pet food factory. I've always wanted to do that. And it makes for great jokes like that.
Is Denver in the future still as bikeable as Denver is now?
No, don't I wish. So in the world that we posit, we are extrapolating from what has been happening in order to refute it. So this project started in 2016, and it started with a lot of political stuff going completely haywire. And our circle of friends kept saying, we're screwed. We're screwed. We're screwed. I have a scrappy streak in me. And so I turned to Nonier one day and I said, look, let's posit we're screwed. Let's imagine this dark future. And then let's prove that we can get out of it, even if it goes dark, even if it gets really awful. Let's prove that we'll get out of it one way or another. So what we wrote was an America where the political system degrades to the point where 7 corporations take the country over. And the day you're born, your parents have to sign a corporate contract to pay for your birth, indenturing you to a lifetime in service with a corporation. And the group that we write about are part of the resistance force who live out in what they call the dust. So it's the areas that are currently exurbs of Denver, but we're imagining a Denver that is very much more dry, and they've given up on these exurbs because they can't provide them water anymore.
Hmm.
So they've been taken over by people, they're called the fringers, squatters, people who've given up on society, and people called dusters, who are essentially a resistance force. They are what's left of the American army, who said, no, we refuse to sign up with these corporations. We signed up to be the United States of America. And the people we write about are their grandchildren. So they've been fighting this war for 3 generations, trying to get the country back together. And that's where we start the series. So it's a very messed up, very dark world. But the whole thing that we showcase is the solidarity and the power inherent in people standing together and standing up for each other. So the series starts in cyberpunk and climbs up into solarpunk over the course of 8 books as people work together, fight for each other, and build on their wins.
What's the difference between cyber and solar punk?
Cyberpunk is high-tech, low-life. Solarpunk is just the inverse. Or you could say high-tech, high-life. So solarpunk is about the dignity inherent in people and the dignity inherent in life. Cyberpunk is about power and wealth, or the lack of it.
So like a tank girl would be cyberpunk.
Yeah. I mean, some people, if you really want to split hairs, it's diesel punk. But at that point, I think somebody's splitting too many hairs. I would
Is
say
that because of engines?
Yeah, diesel punk is engines and
Like Mad
a
Max.
focus on mechanics.
Hmm.
I would say the difference is between Wakanda. I'll think of the name in a minute. Black Panther is solar punk, whereas Minority Report or the classic Blade Runner is cyberpunk.
Okay.
And the other usual difference is cyberpunk usually ends with the protagonist isolated or dead, whereas solarpunk showcases communities fighting for each other and standing together.
Where do you do most of your writing?
Anywhere and everywhere. I am a omnivorous writer. I'm a very flexible writer. So at home in my desk or in a coffee shop or with my computer on my knees, wherever I happen to be. My co-writer prefers everything to be nice and quiet and settled at home.
Do you have when you're working on a project actively, how do you keep yourself going? Like, how do you set goals? Do you use time to write or word count or something else?
I tend to think cinematically personally, so I use scene. So this event is what I'm writing at the moment, and I will write very focused until this event has been completed. And then it might take me a bit to recover, but I actually have the unusual and sometimes hard to discuss problem of stopping what I'm working on. I tend to be the type who gets grabbed by a story and grabbed by the throat and drug along for the ride. And it's hard for me to slow down or stop, even when I really ought to eat or really ought to go to bed. So I've never had trouble getting myself to write. I do occasionally make sure that I'm staying on point and on focus. I have a 5-year list tacked to the side of my desk where I can double check that are on a decent schedule and also aren't about to conflict with each other, because I write under my own name as well. And I want to make sure that I haven't scheduled work with one publisher that's going to run headfirst into work for another publisher and create a situation where I'm scrambling to do 2 book releases in a week because nobody wants to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. What kind of publishing do you use for the collaborative writing?
We work with Amphibian Press, which is a small press out of New England. And they really liked our work when they saw it the first time. So when we went looking for a publisher, we just said, "Hi, are you taking submissions right now?" And the publishing house said, "Yes, we saw your work before. We'll take it." So we got lucky. We were one of the lucky ones.
Have you always published through a publishing house, or have you done any other types?
Under my own name, I self-publish. I prefer it that way simply because I don't want to worry about the submissions process, and I enjoy being on my own schedule. I work as a landscaper, so I have a very seasonal schedule, and I really enjoy being able to work on books in the wintertime and not worry about it in the summertime.
In self-publishing, is that like Amazon, or do you use a self-publishing house?
Ingram, for my personal
Ingram.
stuff.
Okay.
Amphibian has our books up pretty much everywhere. Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Much as we wish we weren't selling on Amazon, they are the gorilla in the room.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we're also in a bunch of local bookstores.
Okay. When you're writing, do you do all of it on the computer, or do you have do you handwrite things, or do you do your timelines and histories some other way, or is it all electronic?
It's all typed up because you do not want to see my handwriting. It is bad news. And the more excited I get, the worse it gets. Therefore, I'm very particular about if I ever want to read this again, I write it on a computer.
How do you find that the collaborative writing affects your individual writing then?
I think it has made me more compassionate. It's made me more flexible, more thoughtful about scheduling so that I don't wear my writing partner out. And it's also, I'd say it's really improved my confidence. I've always had a very task minded, if I haven't achieved this by this time, then I'm worthless mindset. And it's a bad habit to have. So when I'm working with someone else and someone else says, "Look, we don't have to hit that schedule. We're both tired. Why are we pushing ourselves? We don't need to do that." And the publishing house that pays us agrees. Essentially, it's a wonderful thing for me because it gets me out of my own head. It makes me say, "Why am I actually pushing myself?" "Oh, because I feel like I have to." Well, that doesn't make sense. So let's stop. And I've definitely learned a healthier balance from collaborating with others. Don't get me wrong, I sometimes still get frustrated because I'm used to the outdoor work, landscaping mindset of go, 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 go. We got to get more done. And slowing down to the contemplative mindset of a writer and saying, let's do this carefully, let's do it thoughtfully, let's do it well, is sometimes a challenge.
Yeah, I found with the collaboration, it made me look forward to writing by myself.
Yeah, yes.
It doesn't make it, it's not like a mean thing. It's just there's different things you have to do when you're writing collaboratively and when you're writing on your own, which is probably what you were doing before you started writing with somebody else. You go, oh, okay, this is good. It's more, I don't know, aerodynamic, if you put it in that sense of it, where it's just you, so it's easier. And then I like what collaborative writing taught me, and I would write collaboratively again, but I think it's good to have both of the experiences.
I
I'm
think
not
they
sure
both,
I'd want to do just one.
yeah, I think they are both valuable. I had a different experience than you did. I got very excited about collaborative work. I essentially said, I get to go play with my friend. This is amazing. I get to go play. I felt very much like I was going to play a role-playing game or a D&D game. And I made the mistake of being too enthusiastic sometimes and wearing my buddy out.
Mm.
When my buddy just wanted to have pizza and watch a movie, I'd be saying, let's work on that next thing. Let's do this. And I can be a bit exhausting. That's where I say I learned compassion, because I learned essentially to stop chasing other people around and poking them and saying, can we work on it? Can we work on it? Can we work on it? And learn to think things through and calm down. Which is an important lesson for me, because I am a type of person who will run and run and run and run and run until I run into a brick wall, physically or emotionally. And it's healthy to be around someone who says, see the brick wall up ahead? How about we don't hit it?
Yeah. Let's tap the brakes.
Yeah, exactly. And for someone who, I mean, my first job had me working 50-hour weeks when I was 18. That was what I was taught. So that is my mindset, is just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. And it's healthy to learn the balance that I learned in collaborative writing. I definitely want to do it again. We'll be taking a break. I mean, we just knocked out 8 books together. So we'll be taking a break for a while and both writing our own things. But I'm really grateful for the lessons I learned. And I made a great friend in this process.
Good. You said earlier that you started writing poetry. How did that lead into science fiction?
Oh, I didn't start writing poetry. My mistake. So I come from a family that's from Upper Wisconsin, and they really valued recitation. So you would be expected at the family fire or at the kitchen table to be able to recite a poem or sing a song with the family or get up and give a storytelling performance. My family really valued the oral storytelling and poetry approach. And if you could, the first thing I remember being able to perform was a Lorena McKinnon ballad at maybe 9. And the whole family was so impressed. And as a kid, that was really exciting as well, because it was the one time we were allowed to use curse words. So there's an old there's an old British ballad that goes, God damn them all, I was told we'd sail the seas for American gold. And we kids loved learning those old shanty songs because it let us curse without getting in trouble. So I came from that background of making things sound quippy and poetic and making things interesting for oral storytelling, which is great when you're writing dialogue, but it is challenging to learn the mindset of novels after you grew up with that mindset. I was essentially raised with the idea of, oh, books are fun to read, but that kind of stuff is for other people. And we tell stories around the fire, and then we go to work and we get work done. I come from a very rural community. And so as I got older and we moved away from my roots as a family, I didn't have any more fireplaces to tell stories around. I didn't have anywhere for all of that to go. And then I got to Denver and I met some friends, and someone said, hey, this friend over here does a lot of storytelling work and is working on a novel and does collaboration. Do you want me to hook you up? And we got hooked up mostly through an Irish speaking club that I'd started because I was so lonely when I first got to Denver that I wanted to have something to do with words. And I speak the Irish language. And I wanted to be able to practice with others.
Like Gaelic or
Yeah,
just
Gaelic.
an accent?
Yeah. Generally, so Gael actually means it's kind of like barbarian. So usually folks will call it Irish, unless they're Americans and then they call it Gaelic. And I am an American, but my family is Irish in derivation. So I grew up calling it Irish. So I started a club, and friends of friends were like, oh, you need to know this person. They speak Irish too, and they work on storytelling. So Nonier and I got to know each other, and we started working on stuff. And essentially, we went with sci-fi because it was the only venue that would let us tell the angry punk rock story we needed to tell in 2016 about we can see our country going downhill in the future, and we don't like it, and we want to fix it. And that was what pulled me over into science fiction. My first love and probably my native storytelling ground will always be fantasy. But there was this scrappy, pissed off punk rock, necessary story to tell. And it belonged in future America, and it belonged in the sci-fi genre.
Where do you think the drive for creativity originates?
Depends on the project. So the question in and of itself, I have a cultural concept of creativity as the Hazel Well, a deep well inside of you that keeps refilling as long as you don't try to empty it. If listeners are interested, look up the Irish story of the Hazel Well, or the Well of Inspiration. It's a beautiful story. In my personal life, I always picture the Hazel Well as something, it sounds silly, but something inside my chest that's always bubbling.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's more like a flash of fire. And that's what this project was. It was this flash of fire and anger and hope, saying, no, it can't go like this. Watch, I'll prove it. And that's where this came from, more like the concept of fire in the head, which is another old Irish tradition. And you bump into it in some poetry. I went down to the Hazelwood because the fire was in my head, is a line from a very famous poem. In my personal life, it's usually either something I love or something I'm longing for or something I hate that inspires it. And what keeps it going, I'll be very blunt, is needing a break from the real world. If nothing else, I can make things better in writing. I can shoot the jerk in the head who needs to be shot in the head. I can save the character who needs to be saved. I can save the world. And sometimes you just need to be in a place where things can get better one way or another. When the real world is stuck and frustrating and exhausting in its inability to move quickly to something better, then it's comforting to be able to go somewhere where things can get better fast. Or at least you don't have to be here right now.
So escapism.
Oh, yeah.
What's the best way for people to follow your work?
Head over to oetearmann.com, and everything's up on there, or head to amphibianpress.online. That's the press we work with, and they'll be right over there.
Okay. I have a couple of your links also in the show notes. So if people didn't get a chance to write that down or can't remember them, they can go there and look for them. Thank you very much for your time. Do you have anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't, or any thoughts for closing?
Just a thought for the listeners, no matter how dark it gets, it's still worth the fight for a better tomorrow. Don't give up. Things change. Even when it doesn't seem like they can, things will change. It's going to suck, but it's worth fighting for.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.
All right.